We'll get started with everybody with a formal introduction, right? So this is Scott Meyers. And guys, when you're listening to today's stuff, Scott, I mean, he's one of the people that I looked up to when I started building my wealth journey. I was in what I would call a sea of chaos or disease within the guru, the consulting, the expert world, right? I started consulting, thought leaders on their coaching, their mentorship programs, their sales processes, and those kind of things, and real estate companies. And I saw a lot of companies that were full of crap. I saw a lot of companies that weren't real. And I saw some that were real, but their leadership, was very corrupted morally, and their lives were a mess. And so Scott and his wife, Christina, I met them in 2010, 2009, right around that time. And one of the things about my life I've always looked at is I always did modeling, just naturally as a person. Like as a kid, when I watched someone else throw a baseball and the kid that threw the baseball the hardest on the team, I modeled. And as I looked at life and different things, I looked at, there was the commercial real estate training we did, and the leadership there, they were a mess. And there was a lot of different things that were a mess. And I looked at Scott and Christine, I said, here's a model like I could follow. Here's a model I could believe in, I could be a part of. And so Scott's teaching self-storage investing nationally. He's speaking, on some of the largest real estate stages in the country. And he's in the hustle of grinding of what I would call building an empire. And he hasn't screwed up his life. He hasn't screwed up his kids. He's not divorced. He's not on drugs, like all of the different things that are out there. And, his faith was a big, important part of his foundation, which has always been a big, important part of my wife Vanessa and I's foundation. And so, not only as I believe Scott is the only authority or the true authority when it comes to self-storage investing in America. I mean, he owns selfandstorageinvesting.com, but he's also, a real man who's very real about living life the right way. And so, as he shares today, jot it down. He's built an empire. He's raised his family the right way. Take notes. It's going to be great to be able to sit here and talk with him. And, Scott and I hadn't talked much, probably the last, 5 or 6 years, maybe even longer, but we've seen each other from time to time in the industry and stuff. In the last year, we've had a chance to chat more and kind of dive in to some different things as, our accelerated success has happened. So, Scott, what's going on in your business world right now? Kind of share with everybody, give them the quick 411.
Well, first of all, Dutch, thanks so much, and it's been incredible to watch your rise as well. And you're right. I'll give you kudos right back to what you just said about yourself. And I recognize that you model very, very well. You are a student of business, and you've been a student of life, and you've certainly hitched your wagon to some incredible people throughout the years, and taken from them and built an incredible business on your own. So to watch your rise in the way that you've done it, and taking the steps that you and Vanessa have taken to just be intentional as well, it's just been incredible to watch. So I too am thankful that we've been able to reconnect, and sorry that it took so long, but man, you were busy building while I was just still kind of cruising, I guess. I guess I'm catching up to do now.
Well, I had to step away for a little while, right? Mm-hmm. Like I had to kind of step away from the other thought leaders in the world. I had to step away from the masterminds. I had to step away from education, even training myself, which goes contrary to what most people say, right? Mm-hmm. I kind of had to shut everything. For me, I had to shut everything out for a little while to grow and build my business. And I had taken in so much for so many years that I was just kind of at a point where I had to kind of quiet everything and stop the noise. I don't know. You're kind of, though, you're on that constant pursuit journey of growth, both business and personally too, right?
Yeah, I don't get through as many books as I used to. There's a whole lot of podcasts that I listen to, a whole lot of audio books, but nevertheless, I think life is a continuous journey of just learning how to do things better, and the ever present desire to be even more self-aware as we get older. I think it's the greatest gift that we can give our kids, and that's been a reminder as our kids get older to navigate through that and come alongside of them, that I'm still trying to figure myself out, and we all are, I think, until the end. We don't really have ourselves figured out, and the more we are aware of who we are and truly who we are in Christ, and what it is that we're put on this planet for, then I think that is what brings true contentment and fulfillment as we get on in our years, and both personally and financially.
I like the self-awareness comment, because like for me, broken and strong, or broken and complete, or broken and, like all of the different things, like the yin and the yang, right? Reality as you're on the walk is so important, right? I am, a powerful leader, but at the same time, I'm accountable, and I'm humble, and I know what my weaknesses are and what my challenges and my strengths are. And if you can't admit, I always say this, if you can't admit you're wrong, then you can't ever be right. So
Yep. Well, if you can never admit that you're wrong, then you can't hire somebody to do what it is that you can't do very well, right?
True too. Have you struggled? So I usually see, like, with a lot of leaders, I see some of them struggle with delegating because they kind of have that control freak part of it, right? Others, delegate so much because they can't micromanage. Which parts have you? What do you feel like you've struggled with as a leader?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, Dutch. I by nature I'm very, I don't want to say controlling and not a perfectionist. Although if I'm saying that, if I had to be honest, I don't demand perfection, but excellence. Anything that we put out, regardless of how, performance, we need to perform at a level that is high, and that is excellence. And so I have very little tolerance for simple mistakes. There's certain things that I want to have done my way, and I think everybody does. And I am happy to delegate because I can't do it all. And at the pace that we've grown and we've been growing, I recognize that. And that's the first step. Any book that you ever read and any other person that you follow that, talks about growing and scaling an organization, nobody's going to do it as good as you. You have to be good with that. You hire good lieutenants underneath you, and they're going to make mistakes, and you come alongside them and you help them and make it clear up front what it is and what your expectations are, and help them to share the vision, but also let them carve their own path, and you don't micromanage and stand over top of them, or you're going to lose them as well. That still doesn't mean that I don't have the right. It is my organization. My name's on it, and I started it, and I can step in if there's something that I don't like. If something's going in the wrong direction, it doesn't mean that you have to be hard and fast and let everybody do everything their way. If you can see that there's some things that are, maybe we deviate away from our brand just a little bit and we're starting to lose our identity, or if there's something that I think it can be a little bit better, and so I'm going to come alongside and maybe shore this up a little bit. So I sound like I'm being wishy-washy on that, Dutch, and that it is very situational. Probably the answer is always it depends, and it does depend upon that situation. But I still, if we're on a fulcrum, I say I still lean towards, there's things that I want to have done my way. I do want to make sure that it is done with excellence, and I think that's more than anything. It's because when you build something, you don't want it to see it, even tarnished a bit.
But wishy-washy is a part of being a great leader, in a way that, like, if you're not leading an organization, it's very hard to understand that. Like, when I have a great example is I promoted a new leader in charge of one of our departments. So I want to give them the ability to train his people, ability to fire his people, give him the ability to make decisions about his part of our organization. But at the same time, there's challenges and there's moves and there's things that I need to have happen. Right. And I need his part of the organization to run the way I need it to run in order to fit into the overall mold. Right. And so there's a balance between being hands-on and making sure that the things that have to happen and you need to happen for the organization, but also having someone else giving them enough rope so that they can grow and develop. Like, another great thing is, like, certain things that just, when it comes to our brand or our reputation, there's no gray area. When it comes to like one of our programs, right, our inner circle is, partnership deals. I say they're either in a deal or they're not. And if they're not in a deal, then they get refunded. Right. And it's just, it's hands down. And 3 months, 6 months later, if I don't see someone in there, I there's an intensity to me when it comes to that I don't believe in being overly intense or a dictator when it comes to running my organ or coming off as that in my organization. But at the same time, when it comes to certain things, there's no, certain things are not gray. Certain things are black and white. So it's, I hear you with reputation. Let's talk reputation, right? Every time there's a thought leader that comes into our world, right, they can be seen as competition. They can be seen as something good. They can be seen as something different. You and I've seen a lot of people come and go, people that don't exist in the industry anymore, and people that have existed, over a decade. And then you see brand new people come in. When you guys talk about your reputation, what is the most important, traits, values that you guys have over there as a company?
It's interesting. I mean, we look at this, our whole business, Dutch, is a journey, and it isn't until you get on in years until you recognize that the package continues to just begin to evolve. And I mean, we kept our nose to the grindstone and just worked really hard in the very beginning, and we kept our nose clean because we recognized that we have to answer to our lenders, and we have to make sure that we pay them back when the loan is due, and we need to pay them on time. And then when we begin raising private equity, we needed to do what we said. We needed to make sure that our projections are pretty strong, and we have consultants and folks that come alongside of us because there's no turning back. And if we put a projection out there to our equity partners, this is a marathon, and if you mess that up, if you fall short of that because you just didn't do your job, well, they're not going to come back to you. And so every step along the way was one that we are building something, for longevity. We've treated everything in our business as a marathon. There was never a sprint. There was never a one and done, or let's just make some money and get out. And we didn't really recognize the importance of that. I mean, first of all, we didn't know how to do it any other way. However, we didn't recognize the importance of that until later on when now I go to a family offices event in New York last week, and the panel discussion of all the heads of these family offices that are deploying 50, 100 million, $500 million into these syndications and larger funds and equity projects. They asked the moderator asked the panel, what is it that you, as the head of a family office, what are you looking for, and from a syndicator, from a fund, anybody like myself, before you invest with them? And all of them, hands down, there's 8 of them on the panel, said integrity. Well, you can't put that on a website. We have integrity. You can't model it. You can name your company Integrity, LLC or something, but that isn't something that anybody finds out or understands until they begin to do business with you. So these folks that are deploying capital, they need to troll, they need to follow you for a little while, and they need to be able to find that. And so the fact that we've been around for a little while, the fact that if you look on the internet, which leaves a lot of traces, if they don't find any instances of anything nefarious, or if you're still in business and been in business for a long time, well, that's one piece. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to show them, and they need to be able to find somehow some breadcrumbs that you've left that maybe you went above and beyond. You gave up some of your profits in a syndication deal to get your investors the IRR. You shorted your percentage to get them theirs and meet your projections. Maybe it's a little bit self-serving so that you could hang that on your website to say that you've met that, but at the end of the day, you don't have to. Markets and things and deals change, and many people wouldn't do that. Maybe you decided to eat the cost of all the attorney's fees to get out a bad partner, even though you could have charged that back to the fund or to somebody else, but you didn't because it wasn't the right thing to do. Or the ways that you're taking care of employees or anything else. I mean, that's just, for us, we not only live by our faith, but that it's a big part of what we do and who we are in our business. We don't promote it as a reason to invest with us, but when we get to the place where we are now, Dutch, especially as we head into this next economy, people are really, the huge returns and everything else that many of these other folks that are raising capital, that only goes so far because that 50% of that was the market, and that market is gone. So now we're separating the wheat from the chaff, and those folks that have been around, like you and I, that have been through a couple of recessions, we've grown a large company, we haven't had missteps, or we wouldn't be around. We've been able to profit during that time. We don't have any baggage with us, and they can point to and talk to any one of our equity partners or any one of our staff and say, yeah, these guys are doing it right, and here's why I'm still working here, and here's why I still invest with this company. That is, it's not part of the brand, it's just how we do it, but we recognize that is one of the reasons why people are attracted to us, and that has helped the brand over the years.
Speaking of this next economy, and actually, let me define this real quick. Family offices, for those of you who don't know, right? It's like, you think of billionaires like Bezos or Gates or Buffett or those kind of things, Musk, right? You think of some of those billionaires, they have offices, they have part of their organization that invests their money, that runs their money for them. And for every one of those billionaires, there's also, 200 people or 1,000 people that are worth 100 million or a couple 100 million, right? And so these family offices, run the money, they invest the money. And it's just something that is out there that's not available to a guy who's doing his first flip deal or his first real estate deal, right? But it is available to people who've raised capital, have proven a track record, have proven a history, who've made people money, who've made sacrifices, right? One of mine was, we had an investor who had a house stolen from him, right? Fraudulent deeds, and those kind of things, literally stolen from him, and we just, bought him out of the deal, and we knew it'd be a 18-month journey legally to get the house back and all of those things. We just bought them out, moved them on. It's very similar to what you're talking about with your IRRs, taking a bite to make sure that they hit the returns. But the reality is, when you start to play the game to the place where Scott and I've gotten to, it's really no longer about money to us. And I think that's, there's a freedom to that. But if you can work on that in the beginning, it also changes how you approach the business. And yes, you get on the wealth journey to make money, but at the same time, the money will be there when you let go of the money. And that's very, very challenging, because it's not that we don't pay. I know you pay hard attention to numbers. I know you probably get KPIs every single day. I know that you are, there's an intensity to that. But as far as my personal wealth, I'm more interested in what we're building, because I know my wealth is where it needs to be, and it'll continue to grow and continue to get, but I let go of that other part of it. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that part of that share?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's interesting that and not coming from a place where we say, okay, well, we're set, we don't have to do this anymore. Now it's just a game, and money is just a way to be able to keep score. It truly is about building something great. And I've, from the beginning, I guess I was built to just, I don't know, kind of fix things and maximize and optimize. That's just what I get a kick out of that, no matter what it is. Used to buy or pull bikes out of the trash at the side of the road at the curb on trash day and fix them up and sell them to my buddies. And then I did it with cars, and then we started to do it with houses and then apartments, and then we began to buy businesses that way, real estate components that had a business component to it, and just fixing those up and optimizing them. And so anytime, looking at an opportunity to be able to fix something and make it greater, that's what I get a kick out of. And so you measure that, the way that we keep scores, in the numbers, the valuation, where you take a business, or how much profit in a particular deal, if you will, or if we sell off a property or a portfolio, and all that does is allow us to keep score. But that's the fun part. That's more of the legacy part of it, is now we get to do that with more commas and zeros. And we get to leverage that, and we get a seat at the table to do joint ventures and do some bigger things, because we've done it right, and we've done it well along the way. And it really is at some point that shift. And I don't know, it's different for everybody, but I don't know that I ever, Dutch, you're right. I look at KPIs. I'm really good at real estate math. But Christina, she handles all the personal stuff. She lets me know when I have money, gives me my allowance, and if we can buy a toy or what kind of vacation that we're going to go on, we get the ability to do that. But that is completely secondary to anything else. So long as there's breath in my lungs, then I'm going to continue to go out and find opportunities, beat my competition to the punch, and be able to turn these things around, whatever this thing is, a business, real estate, and make it the best it can be. And that's what keeps me moving and gets me up every day.
I mean, everyone else might not agree with this, but Vanessa's our household CFO too, right? And rule number one, you want to be a successful man, right? Get a really good woman to help you there. In our family, I always tell the joke. I'm like, find a great wife, have a great life. Don't find a great wife, good luck.
Yeah.
I had a nephew get married last Friday. Yeah. Speaking of things, fixing things, optimizing things, making things better, right? The government is constantly on a journey of trying to tweak, adjust the economy, right? And I don't completely understand it, because I come from the school of economics of true capitalism, which, the economy will right itself. It'll adjust itself. The market will shift. They raised interest rates to slow down the real estate market, but at the same time, when people stopped buying, it would have slowed down the real estate market. And until that happened, it was unnecessary, right? Now there's other things, as far as, hyperinflation affecting people's ability to buy common things, right? Which I can understand. So what do you think about raising interest rates, where that's taking our real estate economy? Where do you think we're headed in the next, 90 days and the next year?
Yeah, well, that's the answer, or that's the question being asked on virtually every podcast. And
I have to ask
right now. I know. Well, because I do the same thing, and that's and my answer is my crystal ball is broken. But we're, interesting. We talk with a lot of other syndicators as well, and folks that are raising a lot of capital and deploying a lot of capital and doing big deals. And those folks that were raising $100 million in a fund are now backing that down, and their fund is going to be $50 million. And I don't want to keep going back to the private equity and the large dollars, but these are the folks. I mean, we follow the folks that have an ear to the ground. And so, what we're seeing right now
Is that really because they want to raise less though, or is it
no,
because
it's
they
not. No,
can't?
it's not, Dutch.
They're not able to raise more.
That's it. I mean, I think you know the answer, and that is we're in a place right now, and this is a little different. Every recession is different. There's lots of lessons that we pulled from '08. There's lots of lessons that we pulled from '99, 2000. Every recession is a little bit different. And this one right now it's not going to be a real estate recession because it didn't start that way. It started with the inflation of consumer products, period. And now we're heading into the place where we're going to see a devaluation of real estate secondary to that because of rising interest rates, because that's the monetary policy that the Fed is deciding is what's going to slow the economy and inflation down. To your point, capitalism works. The market works, and it always corrects itself. It always has, and it always will. However, what I see right now is in terms of the effects, we see we're seeing a slowing down of people. People are holding on to cash right now. I mean, when the Fed comes out and they basically state that we are going to raise rates until we break the economy, well, that then invokes a lot of fear in people. So they're pulling out of the stock market. The stock market's still going up and down, back and forth, but primarily going down. So we got a whole bunch of folks sitting in cash, and even though we know what the math looks like. Inflation isn't really the 6% that they said it was last summer. It's not the 9% that they said it was this summer. The real inflation rate all in is somewhere in that 14, 15, maybe 16% range. And so, looking at your own finances or your investable dollars or as your corporate cash, if you're not gaining or earning more than 14, 15% on your cash, then you're going backwards. That's the reality. Whatever number that you choose as inflation, if you're not earning more than that, then you're going backwards. And so it's difficult for us right now. The challenge that we have as a company in raising equity to grow, there's no shortage or lack of opportunities and deals, if you will, projects that we have to work on, from development to acquisitions and portfolios that we're looking to buy. But we can't raise the equity as quickly as we used to, because now we are battling that sentiment by the feds that they're going to break the economy. And so that if that's the case, then most of these folks are scared. They're not, no matter how much we tell them that they should be getting off of cash, well, their argument to that is, well, that's great, Scott, but so I'm going to put my money with you and ride the economy to the bottom, because we're not at the bottom yet. Because the Fed just said that they're not, and we don't know exactly what measures they're going to take. And even though you're optimistic and you're in storage and you're in commercial, I'm not so sure that I'm still willing to part with my cash, because even you don't know what's going to happen. And so that's where we're at in the economy right now, and that I think is the sentiment. It's not necessarily mine, Dutch, but I think that's what, by and large, what most folks are, the sentiment of most folks that are sitting with investable dollars is that they are in cash or on the sidelines, and they're just not ready to part with that, even if they know that sitting in cash and the inflation is eroding the value. They're still not willing to get that money back to work.
So I've been waiting for this, right? Like,
I
you have too. I've been waiting to this since 2008.
Yep.
Right.
We've been preparing for it.
I've been excited about this and since 2008. And so, it's fascinating, this conversation, because there's a dynamic here, right? It's a dynamic with people's relationship with money. It's a dynamic with what the government's doing. And it's a dynamic with the reality of economics. The part that I think a lot of people don't understand is I don't know that they're going to break our economy as much as they might break cash. And the value of cash.
100%. Yep.
And if your cash is broken, but what you're holding on to is cash, you could get yourself into real worse trouble. But the problem is, everybody looks at it, they're like, well, my money's in the markets, and the markets are losing, and then they're losing, and then they're losing, and then they're losing, right? And so they get into the dynamic, because that's what the mainstream understands is right. is markets. And I look at this, I always said to myself, when this happens, I want to be in a position to raise the most capital and the most cash I've ever raised in the history of my life, because the buying opportunities are so great. Like the last couple of years, we were battling with every brand new person who had never done investing before, who could just make an offer and then make 20%, right, on a real estate deal. Whereas now only the people that know what they're doing are going to make money. But the ones who know what they're doing are going to make a lot of money. And so we're in this fascinating dynamic right now where if you understand it, you understand it. And if you don't, you don't. And so that's, the challenge with the average person is if they break cash than what's left. I've always said to myself, the reason I invest in farms and I invest in houses, because I always say people need a place to live, people need a place to eat, right? People need a place to store their things. These are things that we saw in '08 where self-storage and apartments, the value proposition in those grew tremendously after '08, right? They became more valuable, worth more. They had higher occupancy rates. You could charge higher rates, right, with both rents and storage. So these are things that I found, very lucrative, right? I hadn't looked at apartments and self-storage the last 2 years nearly as much, because I didn't see, a 5 cap wasn't exciting to me, especially when you're saying if you're not making 12, 14, 15% right now, your money's losing money. And so, for us, we have to shift with the times in order to do that. Now, I know you're in a form of storage with development and other things where you make way higher percent returns, but an average person buying storage is different than you buying storage and how the game works. But, I think what they do is they break cash. What do you think of that concept?
100%, because even though we may be buying, it doesn't make sense to buy something at 5%. Well, where can you take it at 5% cap rate? Well, where can you take it? What kind of value can you build in something? I mean, that's what investors have to look at, and how quickly can they raise the value. And also, your all-in returns also include depreciation. So let's not forget that. And so, there's that piece of it. But here's one thing that I guess I'll turn this back to you, Dutch, and for everybody else to maybe set your mind in a different direction. And that is, we are in the largest wealth transfer in history right now, from the boomers to the next generation, or generations coming behind them. I forget what the trillion is, what the number is in front of it. But the interesting piece is that only 7% of that is in cash. And so what that tells me, or what I read into this, is first of all, the baby boomers did a very good job of investing, and the greatest wealth transfer is in assets. It's in real estate. It's in assets. It's not in businesses, because that's not counted in it. It's in assets, and assets are real estate, and only 7% is in cash. So one, if you're in cash, that's not the best place to be, and two, it means that perhaps that number was greater. That cash number was greater, but that has been eroded by inflation, or that has been eroded because it sat on the sidelines while everything else grew. The greatest wealth transfer was in assets, and it was 7%. So maybe, all things being equal, apples to apples, maybe 20 years ago, 20% of it was in cash that never got invested, and now it's only 7% because the rest was invested in real estate or hard assets. And I don't know that to be true, but what I do know is that is a very small percentage, which also indicates that that is not the place to be right now. So that is how they can affect change, is by cash. But if you are in a hard asset, especially an income-producing asset, again, like real estate, and I'm biased, obviously, for many reasons, but for good reason, it is a place to not only hedge against that, so even if you aren't keeping up with inflation, at least it's not eroding and you're not going backwards. And for those of us that have been doing this for a while and you know how to create value, then yeah, I'll buy it a 0 cap on something, because I know I can turn it around, and all things being equal, it could be a 20 cap in 2 years when I sell it, because I've 3x the value in it. And that's we have the ability to do that when we buy troubled businesses, when we buy troubled real estate, anything distressed. Going back to my comments about being a fixer-upper, I think those that are just going out and paying something retail, and buying a multifamily apartment complex at the mall at Macy's and paying top dollar, and getting a coupon that pays you 8% or something. I mean, that's okay, and you get the tax advantages of that. But folks, you can do better than that. We can all do better than that, and go out and create value in something, and that is the true key to not only going backwards but also creating wealth.
And it's fascinating. I probably learned more of that from you, Scott, than I did anyone else in the world. When a decade ago, when I was working with you and Christina and Vanessa and I were, and our team was, I listened, I paid attention, right? And the things he's saying helped me build, we're closing in on a $150 million portfolio at this point. And I think I really truly believe in the next 2 years we'll 10x that. And value add real estate is so critical. And if you don't know how to add value within real estate, and a lot of people just bought and they gained appreciation and they made money from that, that was awesome during that economic time. This is an economy where you have to add value. Well, I had to add value in the last economy too, but at the same time, this is an economy where you have to add value within the assets within your real estate. Now, this wealth transfer is fascinating concept, because so one of the things I realized about some of the cities we've invested in and previously, Philly, Houston, being two of those cities, right? And there's large African American communities there that dealt in cash, right? Because government programs, government loans, there's a certain part of discrimination that existed against them being able to borrow money in the past, right? And I'm glad that we're past that. But those markets, had a cash market, and so those real estate values held slowly. And because you can only buy and sell cash when you're not using leverage, the values don't go up. It's just like same thing when you go to a car dealership these days, they're going to talk more about the payment than they are the total price of the car, And so for us, we started seeing how much cash devalued asset, right? Without being able to use leverage, without being able to use the tools to be able to grow the true value of assets and different things. And so when they raise interest rates, they limit the amount of lending, they limit the amount of borrowing, and that's part of how they want to slow down economics. My challenge with that is I feel like they hurt the poor more than they hurt anyone else, because I'm still going to go invest. I'm still going to go and buy real estate. If I got to borrow at 8% versus 9%, then I'll find better margins. I'll find better deals. It's just what we do. But a person who's just for the first time in their life, buying a house, and they're paying 6% versus 3%, the double the payment changes their ability to buy, their ability to, and it changes their monthly extra income they're going to have, because they're paying twice as much, for assets. Right. And so that to me is kind of where the rapid raise of interest rates, I don't think Amazon cares that much if they have to borrow money at a certain percent versus another percent. I don't know that Amazon borrows money, but I don't think, as big companies do those kind of things and big investors do those kind of things, right? They're not really truly hurting us, in the sense they're going to might change the profit margin for my investors, right? But my investors made over 30% last year. And so a difference in 3 interest rates points, it's not going to change their world and not going to change my world all that much. But the availability of money,
yes,
and the availability of money to make things happen through commerce, the world happens. A lack of commerce is where the world doesn't happen and business doesn't happen. And I've never in my life felt that saying slowing down business or having less businesses is a good thing.
Yeah, you're 100% correct, Dutch. And you said you think that this is going to happen, and this is the way it works, and it is 100%, because as you know, we go to Mexico, we build houses there. We've been to the Dominican Republic, and we do mission work in Uganda. And we just started a microloan program in one of the cities that we do a lot of home building in Ensenada. And it was for a gentleman that we had. He received a house, and he wanted to start his own business. And he wanted to start out. He wants to run his own, not only a taco stand, but then eventually a restaurant. But he wanted to start with a taco cart. And he said until, long story short, and this is not doing anything to point back to myself or ourselves and our organization, but he said he never would have been able to do this if he wouldn't have been able to get a low interest rate loan through this microloan program, because he would pay double the amount that he would borrow back to the Mexican government. I mean, these are the areas. You want to talk about areas of the United States? Well, let's just go to an impoverished country. These markets where they can't borrow either. So 20% interest over 5 years, the course of a normal loan, and you're paying double. Nobody can afford that. You can't afford that. That's why no businesses are started. No, commerce isn't taking place. It's stifled. It's halted. And those folks in that situation that want to start a business, they don't, because the cards are stacked against them. So you're right. When you begin to raise interest rates that much, then it is not only it doesn't just make a dent in business. Then all of a sudden it shuts down and stops the ability for any startup to occur, because most business startups in the U.S. fail. What is it, 80-90% now? I don't know what the rate is. Within the first 1 to 2 years, and then 75% in the next 3 years after that. I mean, that's at historical rates of anywhere from 5 to 8%. And then you go into another country without the tools, the resources, the education, and they're trying to do a startup at 20% interest rates out of the gate. Forget about it. It just doesn't work.
If you look at the last time we raised interest rates in a rapid progression, right? Unemployment in the United States went up over 10%.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And, we just came from a time where, it's a pain in the ass as a business owner when there's 1% employment and you're having a difficult time finding employees, and your employees can leave your company and they can just go to another company, right? That's a pain in the ass. But at the same time, a pain in the ass is different than 11% unemployment.
Yeah.
When you have,
Mm-hmm.
we have,
Mm-hmm.
we're closing in on how many people do we have in the United States? 350 million,
Yep.
that
Correct. Mm-hmm.
roughly, right? So
Mm-hmm.
now you're talking about 10%
Mm-hmm.
of that, of people being not underemployed or not having the
Yeah.
wrong employment, but being unemployed,
Mm-hmm.
because those are newer terms, right? With underemployment, wrong
Mm-hmm.
employment, those are newer terms as a part of our total unemployment. Back
Mm-hmm.
then, it
Mm-hmm.
meant, when they talk about unemployment, it meant those people flat out couldn't find work.
Right. Yep.
And
Yep. Out of
and
work
that's
and looking. Mm-hmm.
that's the last time they raised interest rates like this,
Mm-hmm.
and so,
Mm-hmm.
for me, I'm built, with adaptation in my blood and genes, like, like you were talking about before. Some of your superpowers are also some of, your weaknesses, when you're talking about control versus letting go, or, some of those different things. For me, my ADD, right, is one of the things I
Mm-hmm.
have to avoid as in running our organization. And I have to, be like a bowling lane, what I got bumpers like my kids, right?
Yeah. Well,
Like,
remember, Dutch, we've had this
yeah.
conversation. There is medication for that, and I can, I can point you in the right direction if necessary.
Well, I think that the if I believed in medication for that, I also believe it's
Yeah.
part of super genius, right?
Yeah.
My ability to hyper focus in ways. So,
Of course.
and we're pretty naturopathic and homeopathic at this point in our lives too. But the
Hmm.
great part is, for us as owners, we have to constantly adapt. And so when you're
Hmm.
looking at your adjustments, adjustments, what are the things you feel like you might have to do in the next year, as far as adaptation or shift, or shifting?
I'm sorry, Dutch. Can you say that again? Sorry, you cut out for a second there.
So you're the one that was getting the ADD moment. You had a whole picture movie running in your head. No, I'm
Yeah,
just teasing.
really.
The
And lost
so in
it.
the next year, adaptation changes, with
Yeah.
things that you see happening, things that you guys are doing different.
Yeah. It's interesting. We're slowing a bit. Part of it is by design. We've gotten to that place where I'm trying to release some of the control that I have in one of my businesses. It takes a lot of time. It's one of the marketing businesses, and our kids are scattered. Our two older kids are in Phoenix, and our younger is getting ready to head out of the house very soon. And so we find ourselves having a little more time, but then time to travel. And so by design, we're going to try to slow down so that we have the ability to do that. I'm somewhat letting the market come to us, but it doesn't mean that we're slowing down. Like you had mentioned, Dutch, we've been preparing for this since 2008. I mean, this is going to be the biggest land grab, in my lifetime. And in the next 5 years, we're ready to go. We just need to raise the capital. We got our lending relationships lined up. The deals are starting to come right now, and so we're just navigating through this hump until we fully get into the recession. Which I just want game on. Let us know when we're at the bottom, then we'll know what to do. Give me the rules, and we'll continue to go. And so I am looking forward to this next 2-3 years, call it that cycle, where we're going to be in hyper development and acquisition mode. And then we'll spend the next 2 to 3 years creating value and selling when interest rates come down and cap rates come down again. And so at the end of that 4 or 5 year period, then that's when things will look dramatically different. And so as we head into 2023, we're looking at our marketing spend, how we market our message, really honing in on that, keeping track of the dollars. So if something's not working out there, we don't want to overspend in our messaging to our private equity partners, to our students and our education business, and anywhere. Just being mindful of that. And we're also preparing for the worst. We're not doomsday preppers by any stretch, but there's a whole lot of stuff that we're seeing out there that is being talked about in a lot of circles by some really smart folks that we're paying attention to. And so, we are prepared for call it the worst case scenario, just so that we are able to continue to move forward, and also our staff and those that we're entrusted to. There's a whole lot of folks that we are responsible for in terms of payroll and their livelihood and otherwise. And so we're battening down the hatches and preparing for the worst. But at the same time, we are ready to deploy, and we are ready to go forward, just as long as we have a clear set of rules, and that is kind of developing every day. So that's probably not the best answer that I can give you, but
No, it's a great
it
answer.
truly is how we're operating.
If somebody breaks down what you just said and they take some of the incremental pieces of it to it, and they're paying attention, right? Preparing for the worst, right? Doesn't mean you're a doomsday prepper, but at the same time, to think that, as a great example, Russia and Ukraine are at war, and the United States is clearly entering into that war in a great many ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was talking with one of our Chinese investors recently, and he said he's scared to put money into more money, and he's got invested with us over the years. He's scared to put more money into our fund because he's worried about the propaganda coming out of the Chinese government, right? And
Mm-hmm.
he and so those are fascinating dynamics that exist that I see that are out there. Doesn't mean we had a hurricane here in Florida last week. I'm not believing that my house is going to be flooded and picked up like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. At the same time, I have a generator and I have hundreds of gallons of water, and I have my propane, and I have different things, right, that in order to make sure that we're ready for the things that are coming. When it comes to our businesses, it's the same concept, being prepared for the worst. There's a succession plan. If I walk out of this office tomorrow and I die and I get in a car accident, right, there's a succession plan directly for our company, for my investors. When you talk about people that we're responsible for, we're at closing in on 4,500 total investors between our REIT and our inner circle. So I got 4,500 people right there that we're responsible to when it comes to their capital and their money. And then I have 200 employees right across the board in the company, and those are 200 people, but you multiply them times 4 because of their families, and then now you're at 800, right, that you're responsible for in different ways. And so if we didn't have a succession plan, planning for the worst, it would be terrible, right? At the same time, you have to pay attention to where he's talking about. He's aggressively preparing for what's happening right now. He has a specific model in mind for what's happening right now. He is acquiring more property so he can develop it. If you didn't hear that, if you weren't paying attention to that, that was in his words, right? So these are things as investors, when you look at companies that you're out there looking at who to invest in, not invest into, you have to pay attention to these things, because if they don't have these plans, if they don't have these compartmentalized, then you need to move on to the next company and look at and who to invest into, because this is huge for those of you that are listening on what to do and what not to do during these times. Because reality, if your money sits on the shelf, it's going to erode. It's going to disappear. And if your money's active, you're making active decisions on what to and what not to invest into, and who to and not to invest into. And so as I listen to that, that's a roadmap of a plan of how to handle things, not handle things, how to do things. Now, slowing down doesn't mean that your business isn't growing faster, right? And that's something a lot of entrepreneurs or owners can't understand either. And so he talked about how he's gotten to a place where his kids are in school, college, right? And he wants to go and see them. That's one of the things you want to do, but you also want more time. At the same time, you're stepping back and allowing the market coming to you, allowing your business to work, allowing it to operate, because it's already prepared for this. If you weren't prepared for this right now, you'd be scrambling. You'd be running all over the place trying to figure out how you're going to do this, or what you're going to do this, or how's this going to affect you, or what that's going to happen. And so you'd be a mess when it comes to this economy that's coming. And so I think for me, that should give not only our investors who are listening to this, confidence if they want to go, and invest in Scott's world, right? Go do it. I give you guys full, belief and 100%, stand behind that. And that's not something I think you guys have ever actually heard me say on one of our podcasts, or heard me say on anything that we've shared with an outside company or another company. Go and do it, because you'll have success with it. But I feel like that roadmap is so important. And so as I listened to you, Scotty, you said a lot more than what you probably realize in that moment, or maybe as well at the same time as we go back and revisit it. But I loved what you're sharing. I think we did, our solid hour here today. I think what you shared was amazing. We're going to put links so you guys can go, know who Scott is and know where he's headed. It's an incredible company. I would say if I can, take a lot of, our DNA as an organization and follow and map what Scott's is, over a decade plus. It's funny. I say that, and I used to hear that crap from gurus or putting other gurus. And I'm like, you guys have only known each other like 30 days.
Yeah.
And now, I've known.
It's hard to fake it on a podcast when they have somebody on that they just met because they booked a podcast 2 days before from their agency.
And it blows my mind. I've known Scott, 12 years.
Yeah.
And I've looked up to him when I was getting going as somebody who did it right. And now, 12 years later, I've been able to build, this incredible portfolio. He's been able to build an incredible portfolio. And there's only so many of us out there. with shared beliefs, with shared mission. And so, we'll put his links into the website. Is there anything else you want to share with everybody, Scott, who's listening?
No, Dutch, just appreciate getting back together once again and having a candid conversation. And I hope that something that we talked about sparked something in people out there to maybe allow them to think a little bit differently, hopefully in a more positive fashion, or something to boost their business or their personal life as well. Because that's kind of, at the end of the day, that's where the phase and where we're headed right now is really more into a legacy and how we can affect change in people's businesses and lives versus just make a dollar for ourselves or advance our causes. So I appreciate the opportunity once again, and appreciate, again, everything that you're doing, Dutch, and just great to catch up.
All right, brother. We'll talk soon.
All right. Take care.